Buenos días y bienvenidos. I'm the Reverend Katie Romano Griffin. My pronouns are she, her, and I am proud to serve as one of your ministers.
And I'm Jared Wilson, the worship associate for this week. My pronouns are he, him. On behalf of the entire congregation, we welcome you to our worship service this morning.
Our words of welcome are filled with our deepest aspirations and call us to embody beloved community as we say responsively the words, you are welcome here.
Whether you are joining us for the first time or you've been a member since our founding in 1951,
you are welcome here.
Whoever you are and whomever you love,
you are welcome here.
Whatever your gender identity and expression, beliefs, or immigration status,
you are welcome here.
However you arrived at this beloved place, whether in person or online,
you are welcome here. Speaking of welcomes, we have a very, very special guest preacher today. The Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, who some of you may recognize as the senior minister to our sibling congregation, River Road. So River Road straddles Bethesda and DC, and we straddle Bethesda and Kensington. So we are the margins holding the center. The Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd is an adjunct professor at Meadville Lombard Theological School, and she is the author of After the Good News, Progressive Faith Beyond Optimism. And let me tell you something. People said that James Luther Adams was the theologian of the last century, and I agree. Nancy McDonald Ladd is the theologian of this century. This book is extraordinary. Extraordinary. It is grounded in congregational ministry as a Latina. Nancy gets at comunidad in a way that I've not seen a theologian in Unitarian Universalism do quite in this way with this kind of platform at Skinner House. So we are very blessed and very lucky to have the Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd with us today, and I hope you will give her a warm Cedar Lane welcome. If you're joining us for the first time today, please raise your hand if you are comfortable doing so that our ushers and greeters can find you. We have a gift for you. We also have a nifty little brochure which will tell you a little bit about Cedar Lane. And if you can complete the information on the back, just drop it in the offertory when it comes around, and that will be your gift to us today, besides the wonderful gift of your presence.
And just to draw your attention to our announcements page, there are a lot of wonderful things happening here today, especially for those interested in environmental justice. There's a meeting later on this afternoon. Now, here's our Director of Music, Dr. Henry Sgrecci, to discuss our Share the Plate partner for today.
Thank you, Jared. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My pronouns are he and him. I'd like to talk a little bit about this concert coming up and also how it relates to benefit concerts. A couple of weeks ago, we had a wonderful benefit concert. People come up to me afterwards and say, where did you find all these musicians? And I say, sometimes I don't even know who they are. It's a matter of you get in touch with somebody and they say, I'm sorry, I can't come, so why don't you try this person? So a few years ago, I was introduced to a young violist named Robin Faye Massey, and she has become a dear friend. She's performed on 2 of our benefit concerts, the last one being when they danced the tango up here on stage. And from then, I said, wouldn't you like to come and perform a recital for us, a concert? And she said, sure. So we scheduled her for last year, and then she came up with tendinitis or some sort of an operation on her bowing arm. Couldn't play, so we said, let's put it off for a year. So next Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m., she will be here with her viola, and her colleagues, Toffer Rosiero and my good friend Joe Levinsky on horn, celebrating music for Black History Month and Women's History Month. So a marvelous chamberwork concert. How it relates to benefit concerts is that in 2014, we gave a benefit concert for today's Share the Plate recipient, A Wider Circle. And that followed a summer guest appearance by the founder of Wider Circle, Dr. Mark Burgell, who has become a good friend as well. I was so impressed when he said, I left my college teaching position. Now, granted, they don't make a lot of money anyway, but to leave it to set up a nonprofit because people didn't have enough beds in this area, I was so struck. And so we did that benefit concert, and I wish we could do more, but there are a lot of charities in the area. So today, the Share of the Plate is for Wider Circle. I'd like you to welcome our friend, Dr. Mark Bagel from A Wider Circle.
Thank you, Henry. It's great to be with you. And just very briefly, I'll tell you that yesterday at A Wider Circle, 23 families came that had begun their days in apartments that had no beds or dressers or tables or chairs or sheets or towels, dishes, pots, pans. And by the time they left A Wider Circle, they had all of those items and much more. And they had that because of the generosity of the community. And so it takes about $450 for A Wider Circle to furnish each of those homes, but we charge nothing. Nobody ever pays for services at A Wider Circle, and they never will. And in addition to furnishing homes every day, we do intensive job training so that people can earn their own incomes and hopefully soon not need services like ours. But for now they do, and I'm very grateful to be able to partner with you in doing that. So thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for all that you've done. Really appreciate it. So when the offering is passed today, please give generously. And I hope that you continue to think about generosity as we move into the season of our generosity campaign, which I think is a hallmark, not just in the church year, but spiritually. It is a hallmark because it's an opportunity for us to look at our calendars and our checkbooks and see if they are in alignment with what we feel our deeper values are, and if our giving truly matches what we wish to grow in the world. So I invite you to participate eagerly in our generosity campaign, which begins next week. And I also invite you, this is your personal invitation from me, to join on a spiritual pilgrimage to Cali, Colombia, which will be happening July 12th through 20th. It's co-facilitated by one of our colleagues who lives in Cali and serves as a hospital chaplain, the Reverend Jorge Espinel. Talk to me later if you'd like some details. Also, if you're interested in membership, I'm available to you after service to discuss that as well.
And speaking of service, our pastoral visitors serve our congregation by making themselves available during and after the service to support you if you have a joy or sorrow on your heart. And now let us turn and greet our neighbors, especially any newcomers here today.
Thousand times, come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. So beautiful. Thank you. Spirit of life, we find you in those humble places, the quiet, still spaces where we are held in the love greater than ourselves.
You are the wind in our breath, the fire in our soul, the subtle heartbeat of creation all around us.
Oh God, your love is unimposing yet firm and steadfast, present to all those who would know your peace.
You challenge us in our arrogance and move us to listen deeply when we fail, as we always do, to see the fuller picture.
Spirit of love, you find the gentle words to speak life into us and hold us when all else around us feels broken.
You remind us that we are loved and saved just as we are, for your salvation is found in living life loved.
Remind us of who we are, O holy mystery. Help us to recognize you in the small, everyday moments where you are found.
Grant us the wisdom to notice you, to seek you out in those unlikely and unexpected places. Amen.
As Mike Bruden comes forward to light our chalice, please rise in body or in spirit to say our chalice lighting words in your order of celebration. I will begin with the first paragraph and then ask you to respond with the second. Our chalice reminds us of that the fire within ourselves is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast and our experience here is but a blip in the cosmic timeline. This flame is our promise that in our smallness and our short time on this earth, that we live intently and deeply with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and with a sense of shared responsibility. For as the late astronomer Carl Sagan reminded us, this pale blue dot is the only home we've ever known.
You may be seated. Let us hold in our hearts Leslie Backus, who has written an affirmation for us today, but is home recovering. She is ill today, so I'm going to do my level best to share Leslie's words in a way that is in integrity with her amazing spirit. Leslie says, Cedar Lane made me who I am. I was born the year the church was. I was 4 when we broke ground on this building. The religious education program shaped my worldview and laid the foundation for my morality and ethics. Religious education was not nearly as fun and interesting as it is now. But we had Bible classes, the church across the street, the predecessor to Our Whole Lives, and others whose titles I've long forgotten. In the early 1960s, I didn't know this until today, but Leslie's parents met here. Her mom was actually the director of religious education, and Bob was also an activities coordinator. So they actually, from what Leslie says, they invited the whole church membership to their wedding. And it was huge fun, according to Leslie. She continues to say, I learned and absorbed mores and values that served me well. Speak up when you see a wrong. Be true to yourself, defend the weak, stand for what you think is right, even if you're in the minority, and many more. All these shaped my ideals and my worldview. I've tried hard to live up to them. I was a science teacher and a union rep. More importantly, I use these values or try to use them in my interactions with people, especially the directness and honesty from Denny Flint's and Bill Moore's encounter groups. And music. I've written about it, so I won't go into much detail, but music, singing and ringing is my worship. The adult choir has been my community since 1994, and ringing has been my obsession since Henry let the adults back in. The most perfect moments occur when we work up something exquisite, such as something like a star, Sure on this Shining Night, any part of the Fauré Requiem, or Clif Hardin's for that matter. The peak moment is when we deliver it as a beautiful gift to the congregation. Thank you, Cedar Lane, for being the foundation, if not the framework and walls of my life. May you continue another 70 years. I invite us all to rise in body or spirit as we sing hymn number 128, and let's sing it so loud and proud that Leslie can hear us at home.
much, choir, Mary and Jasmin. I invite you as we enter into this time of joys and concerns and sorrows to breathe and feel that light shining on you. The light, the energy that is the spirit of life, shining on you and shining within you. As we gather each week, not for our needs alone, but to bear witness to our joys and triumphs, our sorrows and disappointments. In the circle of care, we make space for life's complexities, the many experiences that bless and break our hearts. We come together to serve as companions on life's journey. When I hold up my arms, I invite you to say, "We hold you in our hearts." If you are living through the small and extraordinary milestones of life, we hold you in our hearts. If parenting is your spiritual practice, we hold you in our hearts. If you are mourning a loss, if you live with or care for someone with grief or chronic pain, we hold you in our hearts. If you are struggling with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness or addiction, we hold you in our hearts. If you have suffered abuse or injustice, if you are a survivor, we hold you in our hearts. Within our Cedar Lane community, we celebrate the Cedar Lane members Betsy and Sandy Shaw as their daughter Carrie and her husband Josh Bassett welcome baby Sage Elise Bassett, born this past Tuesday in Seattle, Washington. We hold you in our hearts. We hold in our hearts longtime Cedar Lane member Terry Treader, who passed away this week. And we hold in our hearts her husband Steve, daughter Ann, and son-in-law Jeff. We hold you in our hearts. We hold in our hearts the Wigginton family, Jonathan and his wife Erin, and their newborn who is having some feeding problems. Jonathan grew up in this church, and he was an assistant to the youth group and the son of member Jim Wigginton. We hold you in our hearts. And we hold in our hearts Ezra Town and Ezra's family as they recover from surgery. We hold you in our hearts. And our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to all those whose lives are lost and impacted by calamities and violence in our world. We hold you in our hearts. As we breathe deeply and enter the silence together, those who are grieving a loss or commemorating an anniversary of a loss are invited to rise in body or spirit in the memory and mourning of the person. You may rise as you feel comfortable. Spirit of light and love, Spirit that shines upon us, hold us in that universal heart that is always beating, that we are all a part of. Shine your light on us as we come together in times of divisiveness. Shine your light on us as we strive to be the leader that we want to see in this world. Shine your light on the government officials, the ones who are doing their best every day to shine a light on injustice, and shine your light on the government officials who have forgotten that it is their job to fight injustice. Shine your light on us so that we may know that we are good enough and strong enough to live, to fight injustice ourselves another day. Shine your light on us, even though we have broken our vows 1,000 times. Shine your light on us as we come remembering that we cannot despair. Shine your light on us as we feel both despair and elation, gratitude and heart sickness. Shine your light on us as we feel all the feelings, knowing that all the feelings are good and holy. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dayna. You may be seated. We've reached the time for giving in our community, the time when we are each of us called to reflect within and consider the work of this community within our walls and outside of it. Today we are sharing the plate with a wider circle who is working to end poverty. And we are also continuing to support the ministries of this congregation. The children who are in religious education right now make up 48% of who's in this building right now. We are supporting the memorial services that will be happening over the next several weeks as we properly mourn and celebrate the lives well lived of our members who have passed since January, including Terry Treader, whose services will be next Saturday, the 15th. As we enter this time, let us enter with the fullness and the richness of the many ministries within our congregation and the world beyond as we give generously. Today's offering will now be gratefully received.
By the work of our hands and the work of our hearts, our love is made real. May we be grateful for all that is given and grateful for all that is shared. What if we were to embrace saying, I don't know? What if we were to see it as an instrument for opening up and extending all sorts of possibilities, including, crucially, the possibility for connections among people? Our civic life is heavily marked, indeed pocked, by debates in which each side is so certain of its position that any movement is effectively impossible. For that matter, debate in its original sense of to consider something, to deliberate, is impossible. We wind up with so much sound and fury and nothing gained. Only when we allow the possibility that we may not know for sure, when we slip out from under the terrible yoke of our own notions, when we shift from the fundamentalism that has hardened like clay around our feet and allow doubt to flow freely throughout more membranes, though this might sting, only in concert with such internal movement can meaningful forward progress occur. Only when we know what we don't know can we have the dawning realization of the humility we've been reaching out to the whole time.
Hi, neighbors. I feel like this Sunday morning we have just knocked upon each other's door and arrived with a warm plate of cookies and a warm hello. It is good to meet the neighbors. And in fact, these two congregations, yours and mine, have been siblings for so long. And every single year, Bea and Katie and my colleague, Reverend Amanda, and myself at River Road, and these amazing staffs that we're so gifted to work with, we keep thinking of new ways to get up to some holy trouble together, to support and sustain each other as we lift up this faith of ours across the county and into the future. And today, my dear friend Abi, he gave me the job of preaching as briefly as possible on the subject of my new book. And since it's a whole dang book, I will try to keep it brief. And I thought it might be good to get started on that whole thing by letting you know a little bit more about me, your neighbor who has been so near to you for so long. The very briefest version of my spiritual autobiography is this: that I grew up Roman Catholic, and I spent some time when I was a teenager in a Dominican convent wondering like crazy if I was called to the Catholic sisterhood before landing among the riotous rabble of social justice-minded Jesuits, where I studied theology before launching like a bullet straight to the Unitarian Universalist ministry. In fact, I was in theological school at Meadville Lombard, where Dayna is, when I was barely old enough to drink, and I was standing in a pulpit every Sunday by the time I was 25. And what I found in this faith on the other side of seminary, what I found in service to congregations so much like this one showed me the wide open embrace of Unitarian Universalism that is now and will forever be the home for my spirit. Yes, this fellowship right here and across the county at River Road, it is where I belong. It is a home for my life in more ways than I can possibly name. Among them, the fact that it is Unitarian Universalism that gave me my voice as a leader and that teaches me time and time again what that voice as a leader demands of me in these days. Yes, I have been at home in this tradition we share for a long time, except for one little aspect of our collective culture and practice together. One little thing that I've noticed about what it seems to mean to be a Unitarian Universalist that has rankled at me since the earliest days of seminary. Yes, I have one small critique of us, beloveds. One thing about my identity as a Unitarian Universalist that, frankly, I have still not adequately resolved within myself, namely, what has always bugged me about us, my friends. We righteous do-gooders with open minds and warm hearts and helping hands is simply this: that we can be so utterly and damnably sure of ourselves. You see, as I walked the halls of the Unitarian Universalist Seminary, I kept encountering people who were just so certain that they were right about a whole lot of stuff, lots of stuff, about theology. Sure, the existence or non-existence of God was a favorite topic of highly assured debate. But it wasn't just that. People also seemed curiously certain about a whole lot of other stuff too, like geopolitics and wine and meditation, and how nobody but nobody under any circumstances should ever eat at McDonald's. Sometimes I felt that my fellow Unitarian Universalists moved in the world as if everyone else was just about to break through and come around to their perspective on all of those most important things, especially that bit about McDonald's. Given time, the good liberal church people like us seem to think everybody else would get on board And we would all get busy together bringing down those waters of justice and making sure that peace rained down on the whole dang thing like an ever-flowing stream of our own creation. Perhaps we would start this endless and inevitable process through a grand gesture of solidarity with all peoples, like planting a peace pole. Surely that would bring on the kingdom of righteousness sooner rather than later, don't you think? And by the way, let me say that we do have a peace pole. It is right outside my office at River Road, and I am pretty sure there is a peace pole somewhere on the grounds of this fine institution as well. I quite like our peace pole. It says peace in a variety of different languages. I am sure yours does too. Our peace pole, for one, is perfectly lovely, and it has not, as of yet, succeeded in bringing about the much anticipated advent of world peace. Has yours? And that is the real kicker of it. You see, most of the time, then and now, I do not fundamentally disagree with the clearly delineated perspectives and self-assured optimism of my fellow progressives. After all, as inveterate Texan Jim Hightower likes to put it, there is nothing in the middle of the road but yellow stripes and dead armadillos. Yes, it is important to take a stand, to pick your lane, to lay your stake at a particular truth claim that matters. I do not begrudge us our moral clarity. It is vital to take a stand in calamitous days. What was challenging to me among my liberal religious compatriots, what remains challenging to me, is not our analysis of any given situation, nor the ideas promoted and defended with our every last breath in these congregations we hold dear. What is and was challenging to me is the utter certitude with which everyone seemed to hold those ideas. What bothered me back then and bothers me still, even about myself, is how very little room I sometimes perceive in progressive churches for acknowledgments of either one's own limitations or the tragic dimensions of our days that confound and confuse our very best laid plans. Because we live inside these tragic dimensions. We live at the edges of our own capacity. We live in the frayed borders of what we know and what we cannot even dream of controlling. I meet people at River Road in those places. The places at the frayed edges of what they cannot control, the places right beyond the limits of what they are capable of. I meet the people I love and serve at River Road every day as their pastor in those vulnerable and beautiful places. And in the deepest loss and most profound grief, we arrive at the place in which there are no clear answers. And then we get up, we wipe away our tears, and we stride out into the world as if we know what we're doing, as if we're all okay, even though we know full well that we are merely and blessedly stumbling through it all together, doing what we can, while we can, uncertainty our constant companion. Though I could not have stated it then, when I first found our faith, I knew that the sheer confidence expressed among us, the unflappable certainty we express in this confusing world, was something I would eventually have to come to terms with. And that's why I took the time during a sabbatical that River Road so graciously offered me, a sabbatical in which Reverend Abi came and filled my pulpit so I could have a little bit of space to think. That's why I took the time to write that little book that I wrote. Because honestly, though this might not make you want to purchase that book at all, it is a book about the death of pure and unvarnished idealism in the liberal church. It is hopefully a book about a new kind of resilience that arises in the midst of everything we cannot control. My book is about what happens when the liberal church does not have all the answers, And we realize that our peace polls did not, in fact, bring peace. It is about limitations and the pain of meeting them and the curious and transformative power that is available to us when we do. It is about the fact that not even the smartest among us has it all figured out. It's about tragedy. And the fact that not even the best do-gooders on earth, not even all of us gathered in this room or the sanctuary I serve in, can meet the demands of our day without acknowledging the limitations and the gaps that we need others so desperately to fill. This book, After the Good News, it's called, it was born after my own deep grappling with these questions, and perhaps most of all, from my own stumbling efforts to cultivate a spiritual life where I try with everything I have to be kind more often than I am right. And that's why for 10 years, I have spent every single week writing that Sunday's sermon underneath an old yellowed newspaper clipping of this cartoon that you see right there. The printing might be a little too small. I'll explain. It is from the Gospel, according to Charles Schulz, of course. A Peanuts cartoon where Charlie Brown approaches his always writing friend Snoopy, who sits there on top of his dog house, composing, he understands, a book about theology. I hear you are writing a book about theology, Charlie Brown says to Snoopy. I hope you have a good title. I have a perfect title, comments Snoopy. Has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong? And that simple statement, has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong? It might just be the most powerful thing that Unitarian Universalists have had going for us all this time. Over 1,000 years of progressive religious history, even though we are self-assured and sometimes a little bit too puffed up for our own good, even though the idealism and sense of confident clarity present in so many liberal religious settings has something to do with privilege and something to do with class and something to do with education, and yes, quite a whole lot to do with whiteness. Even so, underneath it all, there is a fundamental humility in our theology that we can return to again and again. Our tradition teaches that there is deep and abiding truth in many paths, and that it is possible not only that we may be individually wrong on a number of issues, great and small, but that our way together as Unitarian Universalists is not the right way or the only way for any number of partners and companions we meet along the journey. Indeed, there is no one right way to do this faith of ours. We actually believe in a diversity of perspectives. We actually believe in theological difference. At our best, we have moved way past lukewarm toleration while secretly believing that everybody else ought to come around to being just like us. Because that is not universalism. It's a whole other thing that I can rant about in another sermon, but it is not the theological core of our faith. It is not who we are to declare that we have more access to truth than anyone else. The great philosopher Rousseau once said that I don't know is a phrase that becomes us. It is a starting point for ongoing growth. It is an acknowledgement that wherever it is we are going, we have not in fact arrived there yet. And that there will always be spaces between our blessed assurances. This space, this open space that starts with I don't know and leads to continued conversation is in fact the whole basis of congregational life. The open space that is left by all we do not know is the origin point of the next step on every journey, and it is an essential component of even the most rational questions. without leaving some open space for all you do not know, the whole world could change around you and you would remain fundamentally unmoved. Has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong? It is the question that makes community possible. It is the question that makes personal and spiritual growth possible. It is, incidentally, the exact same question that makes all science possible. Has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong is a question that has haunted the civic life of empires before us. It is the same question that currently haunts our civic life right here in the United States of America, where the performance of blustered self-assurance is placed before us every day as if it is a normal and enviable form of discourse. The stakes could not be higher in reclaiming the fundamental humility of our democracy and our spiritual lives, for when we ourselves submit to this performance of blustered self-assurance as a new normal, we are consenting to a fake form of power, forgetting how to be in community, how to grow stronger by asking the next question on the other side of whatever position we are standing in right now. As Leah Hager Cohen wrote, our civic life is heavily marked, indeed pocked, by debates in which each side is so certain of its position that any movement is effectively impossible. For that matter, debate in the original sense of to consider something to deliberate is impossible. We wind up with so much sound and fury and nothing gained. Sound familiar? We spin and we exhaust ourselves, so busy being reactionary that we cannot remember how to empathize across the categories we have placed each other in. And this placing of other humans into categories for the purpose of easier dismissal, it is the raw ideological material of empires and even of nation states, of wars and rumors of wars, the naming of enemies and friends. I know that there are times in our lives, there are times few and terrible, when you can only survive if you are sure, and if you are clear, and if you are uncompromising in the split-second decisions that are asked of you in a time of crisis. Sometimes empathy is subsumed beneath obligation just to keep you breathing, keep fighting, keep sacrificing and serving, because you have learned to let your uncertainty and even your fear rest beneath the mantle of your higher obligations. That is what we ask so often of those who serve in our nation's armed forces. That is among the risks we invite them to take, to place their own uncertainty and doubt and fear on the higher altar of their service, and what we must offer them in exchange when they return from those regions of the heart where empathy spells danger, are communities where their hearts can heal, and their service can be honored, and their empathy, and yes, their uncertainty can be uncovered for the gift it has always been. Not long ago, I sat down and talked with a beloved congregant of mine at River Road, Bob Heiderer. I talked to him about all of this, and not for the first time, because Bob and I talk a lot. He's just celebrated his 98th birthday, and he has been at River Road since the 1960s. A veteran of 3 wars, who flew a Navy fighter off an aircraft carrier to take on Russian MiGs in the dead of night. He followed his mission faithfully and served his country with distinction in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam before coming home to his back porch right here in Bethesda and to his seat by the window every single Sunday morning in the congregation that I serve. Bob fought in some of the darkest places of a whole generation of America's wars. And when he came home, he says he had to relearn how to empathize again. He had to relearn how to see the fundamental humanity of every soul always, no matter what, and thus make space in his heart for other people again and their differences and their failures and their glory. It is not certainty he was after when he walked back in the doors of his UU congregation after fighting 3 wars for our country. Instead, it was practices to build his empathy and gift it back to him. Empathy is a gift that fills the space where once for him there was only deadly certitude and the survival for another day. So Bob, he sits on this bench that he had commissioned in the garden at my church, this bench where he can see the trees, in which the word empathy is carved in stone like an epitaph. He sits there. And he thinks on a world where all the young dead sailors and soldiers do not have to pretend like they know what they're doing anymore. And because of this, I love him very, very much. We are all more fragile than all of the certainties we might perform for one another. We are none of us in possession of all the wisdom that we need to survive. We are all of us so desperately in need of each other's empathy and compassion that the absence of it could be our undoing. And the gift of not being so sure, of coming home to a theology of empathy and humility, which says that you alone do not have to have it all figured out, which invites you to lean over the edge of all you do not know. It is right here every day in your congregation and in mine, and not just in the walls of our sanctuaries. Sure, I know. We good liberal religious people have every reason to project confidence in ourselves and in the human capacity to overcome great obstacles. Our fundamental optimism is one of our gifts to the world. We can build a world where we bind up the broken. We can plant peace poles that at least point the way toward distant peace everywhere we go, but we can only do it together, with others to fill in the gaps of everything we do not know and cannot fix, with a kindness that is deeper than our need to be right, with an empathy that turns all of our bluster and all of our certitude and all of our self-assurance into a starting point for all that yet will be. May it be so, and amen. Let us sing together. Rise in body or in spirit as you are able. A hymn of praise, God of grace, God of glory. prepare to take this light we have kindled out into the waiting world. May the truth that makes us free, the love that casts out fear, and the hope that never dies, guide us and those we love and those we do not love forward together till the day spring breaks and all the shadows flee away. Amen.
Soft footed.